Welcome to Dark Tales, where we explore eerie stories and chilling mysteries. Our story begins with Jade, a woman in her late 20s who's trying to move on from her past. Recently divorced, she moves in with her old college roommate, Colt, a carefree guy with a laid-back attitude. They settle into an old house, trying to move forward with their lives. But the past has a way of creeping back when you least expect it. Jade, you see, had buried memories from her childhood. It all started when her father, Frank, told her a strange folk tale, one that awakened a deeply buried memory from when Jade was only 4 years old. As a child, Jade had gone missing in the woods near Hubbard Park. Her parents found her, but the strange part? She remembered a black dog standing beside her in the woods, watching over her. Years passed, and that strange encounter faded into the back of Jade's mind. Until, as an adult, she saw the black dog again, this time in a much more terrifying light. That sighting haunted her. She became convinced that something far darker was at play. But she pushed those thoughts away, focusing on her life, her job, and her friendships. Colt and Jade shared a bond, both searching for something meaningful. And though they got along, Jade couldn't shake the eerie memories from her past. It wasn't just the Terry that haunted her, it was her father's stories about 3 times for death, and the fact that Jade's encounters with the dog seemed far more than coincidence. One night around a bonfire, Jade's life takes a dark turn. She stumbles across news of 2 missing girls, Chloe Peters and Alexa Boyd. Alexa, as it turns out, is the cousin of Jade's ex, Miguel. They had split up on bad terms, but Jade couldn't ignore the connection. She had a bad feeling in her gut. She felt drawn to Hubbard Park, where she had first encountered the black dog. Against Colt's advice, Jade reached out to Miguel. She knew he was hurting, she knew he needed help. And more than that, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She and Colt decide to meet Miguel at Hubbard Park to help him search for his missing cousin. On the drive there, Jade keeps refreshing her messages, waiting for some kind of sign. But all she finds is an article about another set of girls who went missing decades ago. 2 friends from the late 90s, Krista and Eve. A woman named Haley, who had been searching for her lost friends for years, believed their disappearance was connected to the same woods. Jade felt a creeping sense of dread. What if it's all connected? As soon as they arrive, Jade spots Miguel at the trailhead, tired and anxious. He'd been searching for hours. The police had moved on to search other areas, but Miguel wasn't convinced. He believed that Chloe and Alexa were somewhere in the woods, near Castle Craig, an old stone tower they used to hang out by. As they begin the hike up the steep trail, Jade is overwhelmed by memories. She can't shake the thought of the missing girls, or the black dog that has haunted her since childhood. Colt, trying to lighten the mood, talks about his own life problems, but Jade barely listens. Her mind is elsewhere. They take a break halfway up the trail, and that's when it happens. Jade sees him, Miguel, standing at the top of the trail. But he's not alone. Off to the side of the road, there's a black dog. The same one from her childhood. The same one she'd seen years ago, and just like before, the dog's presence sends a chill down her spine. 3 times for death, her father's words echo in her mind. She can't move. Colt and Miguel, oblivious to her terror, start petting the dog. They joke around, laughing about how it's just a friendly stray. But Jade knows better. She knows this dog isn't just a dog. It's an omen. Miguel notices something's wrong with Jade. He tries to comfort her, but her fear is overwhelming. 3 times for death, she mutters again, her mind spinning. The black dog had appeared twice already, once when she was a child, and again years later. Now, it was here for the 3rd time. Jade knew what that meant. It wasn't just a coincidence. Something terrible was going to happen. As they make their way up to Castle Craig, the dog disappears into the woods. Jade tries to keep her composure, but the feeling of impending doom is inescapable. The 3 of them push on, determined to find Chloe and Alexa, but Jade's dread only deepens. Her father's warning, 3 times for death, lingers in her mind. Was she next, or were they all in danger? And that's where our story leaves us, on the edge of a mystery, with questions that remain unanswered. What happened to Chloe and Alexa? What's the true meaning behind the black dog? And will Jade be able to escape the fate that seems to be closing in on her? Here is the story of Mika, a young boy from Martinique, an island in the Caribbean. When he was 15, a disturbing event shook his life. It happened more than 4 years ago in 2017, and the memory is still deeply etched in his mind. Mika lived in a house by the sea with his parents. The house was split into 2 parts, the main house and, a little further away, a small outbuilding with a kitchen on the ground floor and a guest room upstairs. This guest room was where the PS4 was set up, the perfect spot to play quietly without being disturbed. That morning, Mika was suffering from insomnia. The sun had yet to rise, and the idea of playing a few video games came to him. He quietly got up, took the key to the outbuilding, and stepped into the night. The atmosphere felt strangely heavy, more oppressive than usual, but that didn't stop him. All he wanted was to start up his console and play without anyone bothering him. Once in the guest room, he made a mistake by leaving the kitchen and room doors unlocked, thinking that if someone else got up, they wouldn't have to wait for him to bring the key back. As he played, the nightmare began. An hour later, he heard the kitchen door creak, followed by footsteps coming from the floor below. Someone was there. At first, he thought it was his parents, but the noises that followed made him doubt. The fridge opened, a drawer creaked, then he heard a strange sound like glass clinking. The tension rose when he realized the footsteps were now heading toward the stairs leading to the room where he was. Terrified at the thought of being caught playing so early, Mika froze. Then the door to the room slowly opened and a figure appeared. It was a tall man with a stunned expression on his face, almost as scared as Mika. For 10 long seconds, this stranger scanned the room with wild eyes. Mika, paralyzed with fear, thought back to the open drawer in the kitchen, fearing the man had taken a knife. Time seemed to stop. The man eventually slammed the door shut and ran off, his footsteps echoing on the gravel outside. Mika stayed frozen, trying to regain his senses. After a few minutes, he finally gathered the courage to go down to the kitchen. What he found was just as bewildering. The man had taken out some milk, opened a box of cereal, and poured himself a bowl, as if nothing had happened. Panicking, Mika ran to tell his parents, who immediately called the police. In less than 20 minutes, the officers arrived. What happened next was beyond comprehension. No sooner had they arrived than they asked Mika if he recognized the man swimming in the sea, just in front of their house. Mika looked towards the water, and there he was. It was him, the man from the room, swimming happily, like a child discovering the beach for the first time. The man was arrested and taken away in a police van. Later, Mika learned that the stranger suffered from mental health issues. This strange encounter, filled with fear and confusion, left Mika with an inexplicable story that he will never forget. Maxime was a 21-year-old who had lived his entire life in a small Auvergne village with a population of barely 100 people. In the center of this village stood an ancient, abandoned house that had intrigued him ever since he could remember. The house had 2 stories, including an attic, and all the windows had been sealed shut with concrete. The front door was barricaded from the inside, and at the end of the house was a barn-style door, secured by nothing more than a rope and a wooden plank, much more fragile than the main entrance. When Maxime was around 12, his curiosity got the better of him. Along with his best friend, who lived just 50 meters from the mysterious house, they decided to force open the barn door and explore the place that had fascinated them since childhood. It was 2012, and the boys returned home from school one day with a plan in mind. After waiting for the streets to empty, they spent about 15 minutes working the door until it finally gave way. Armed with a flashlight, they slipped inside, filled with excitement. The first room they entered was about 50 square meters, filled with dirt, dust, and all sorts of wooden debris. But soon the initial thrill of exploration gave way to an eerie feeling. An oppressive energy seemed to fill the air, as if the house didn't want them there. They pressed on, moving to the second room where the front door, heavily barricaded, stood. In this room, an old staircase led to the upper floor. Maxime was filled with unease as he saw it. The staircase was ancient, dusty, and tilted to the right by several centimeters. It looked ready to collapse at any moment. After a few moments of hesitation, they decided to climb the creaking stairs. At the top, they found a short hallway leading to 2 rooms. They cautiously entered the first one, their footsteps tentative on the weak floorboards. Inside, there was only an old metal bed frame that looked like it belonged in a hospital. Out of curiosity, they tried to lift it, but it was far too heavy. Next, they ventured into the final room at the end of the hall. This room had an oak wardrobe on one side and, in the far corner, a wooden chest that caught their attention. As Maxime approached the chest, the floor beneath him gave way, trapping his ankle in the broken boards. His friend quickly helped him free himself, and the sensation of danger grew too overwhelming to continue. They decided to call it a day and leave the house. A few weeks later, their curiosity reignited. This time, they returned with 2 more friends from neighboring villages, bringing extra flashlights and camcorders. Upon entering the house again, everything seemed normal until they crossed into the second room. Suddenly, their flashlights began to flicker, then went out completely. The camcorder screens turned gray before shutting off, despite all the equipment being freshly charged. The boys were left in the dark, startled and shaken. To make matters worse, they began hearing faint creaking noises from upstairs. Panicked, they bolted out of the house, and once outside, all their equipment turned back on. But when they checked the camcorders, all the footage had mysteriously disappeared. They decided to wait for a while, then return for another attempt. This time, the flashlights stayed on, and they resumed their exploration. But when they reached the upper floor, something chilling caught Maxime's attention. The metal bed frame, which had been in the middle of the first room before, had been moved to the far right corner. That was the last straw. The boys left the house, unsettled by what they had experienced. Years passed and they never went back inside, though Maxime continued to feel an eerie sensation every time he passed the house on his way to visit his best friend. In 2016, Maxime's routine had changed, and he now took a different route to catch his bus to school, forcing him to walk past the house early in the morning while it was still dark. One day as he approached the house, he saw a man standing in front of it, illuminated by the streetlights. The man was unfamiliar, and in such a small village, Maxime knew everyone. The stranger stood perfectly still, staring directly at Maxime. Maxime greeted him cautiously, but the man didn't respond. He tried again, this time a little louder, and took a few steps toward him. The stranger, without any rush, turned to face the house and started walking, straight through the wall, disappearing into the building. Maxime was left frozen in shock. He had just witnessed something he couldn't explain. The man had looked solid, casting a shadow under the streetlights, but he had walked through the wall as if it wasn't there. The story didn't end there. In the following months, Maxime regularly encountered a small, friendly cat near the house every morning. He had grown fond of the cat, petting it on his way to the bus. Then one day the cat was gone. Days passed and Maxime thought perhaps someone had taken the stray in. One evening, as he walked past the barn door, he spotted the cat inside, but it was dead with no sign of blood or injury. It was a heartbreaking sight, and though it wasn't his cat, Maxime shed a few tears. The next day, the horror escalated. The cat's body had changed. It now had a gaping hole in its head the size of a tennis ball, and its entire body had been flattened, devoid of bones, its skin hard like stone. Maxime couldn't understand how this had happened in just one day. Overwhelmed with grief and fear, he ran home. When he returned a few days later, the cat's body was gone. Maxime, consumed by curiosity and dread, decided to revisit the house with his best friend one last time. As they entered the first room, something unexpected happened. A wooden plank that had been buried in the dirt now protruded from the floor. Maxime stepped on it without realizing, and the plank lifted like a lever, ejecting the hardened body of the cat from the ground. It was as if someone had set a trap. This final gruesome discovery traumatized Maxime and his friends, and they vowed never to return to the cursed house again. This chapter of Maxime's life still haunts him, and he's never been able to forget the horrors he encountered in that old, abandoned house. Thanks for joining me today on Dark Tales. If you're as intrigued by this mystery as I am, hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more dark stories from the shadows. And remember, not everything that lurks in the woods can be explained. Stay curious, stay safe.